Are you ready for an epic adventure? The highly anticipated game Forspoken has finally been released with flashy spellwork and a mesmerizing world to explore. Forspoken is sure to transport you to another realm, but as with every great adventure, there are bound to be some obstacles along the way. In my review of the PC version of the game, I'll be taking a closer look at the performance issues, interesting voice acting, and letdowns in the writing. It's not all bad, but it's not perfect either, and in fact, it is far from it. Even with its problems, I can tell you one thing for sure: Forspoken is not a bad game, it's just a disappointing one. So join me as we uncover the why and discover if the game is really worth your time, and most importantly your money. Let's dive in. Diving deeper into the world of Forspoken, it's clear that developers have truly outdone themselves with the spell crafting and animations for those spells. The spells are an absolute visual treat with their glamour and all their flash. Sending a barrage of rocks at enemies or swinging a flaming sword is a feast for the eyes. But as we explore the game further, it's become apparent that the magic is where most of the developers' focus went. The general environments and textures can feel lacking in detail, especially on the PC version, but it is also still noticeable on the PS5. Some textures, especially on rocks, are completely missing, and there are obvious repeated textures on walls, character models alongside clipping a whole host of models. Even on high-spec machines, the PC version of the game suffers from low frame rate, stuttering and popping. Visually, Forspoken feels something more like from the PS3 or PS4 era than the next gen that it's meant to be. From a AAA publisher and with a price tag of £65, I expected more from this title from the visual aspect. But as we continue to play, I can't help but be mesmerised by that spellbinding magic and wonder if the visuals are worth overlooking for the immersive gameplay experience. Giving praise for Forspoken goes to its minimal clutter UI. The screen is very clean, with just a small health bar in the corner and the spell triangle in the other. These would also disappear when not in combat, providing a more cinematic and clean looking visual impression for Forspoken. The cuff scan would reveal interest around the immediate area, similar to what we see in other open world games, but the UI elements would only appear for a very short time, knowing not to clutter the screen up with pointless text or symbols when they aren't actually needed. Transported from New York to the magical world of Athia, Frey sets out to help the local people fight against a devastating plague. But this isn't just any ordinary story, it's actually a personal one as well. As Frey battles against threats both human and beast, she begins to question her own beliefs about the world she comes from while learning about the history of Athia. But Frey's journey isn't just about fighting external battles, it's also about learning to trust others, accept help, and find her place in both the worlds. But let's be real, the beginning of the story is actually really rough. The dialogue is cringeworthy and it takes a while to get past it, if I'm being completely honest. But don't let that discourage you. The voice actress for Frey, Ella Balinska, gives a brilliant performance despite the limitations of the script. The humour included by the writers feels forced and out of place, especially when you're trying to portray a character who wants nothing more than to really be left alone from most of the world. During story elements, cutscenes seem too abundant. Leaving one cutscene, taking 2 steps just to arrive at another cutscene gets frustrating at times, and in fact this happens a lot. You could call it cutscene galore. Why make me walk 2 steps to just get another cutscene followed by the exact same thing? But if you can push through the beginning, you will be rewarded with a story that will pull at your emotions and tug at your heartstrings. It's not an award-winning or entirely new story, but it's a personal one, and overall the story isn't that bad. You've just got to get through the first 2 hours, which is a problem in itself. Why must I wait 2 hours for the story to get good? In the gameplay of Forspoken, the combat system truly stands out. The spell effects are visually stunning and have a variety of uses both inside and out of combat. For example, earth spells can be used to create blocks and launch rocks, while fire spells allow for close-range melee attacks with your flaming sword or throwing a spear. Air spells are great for dealing damage to multiple enemies at once, and water spells offer a mix of range and crowd control options. Switching between spell types is also pretty easy, with 2 different ways to change your elements on the fly. Enemies can also be analysed using Cuff, which shows their weaknesses and resistance to the different types of magic. This allows players to use the right type of magic to quickly dispatch mobs. Combat is further enhanced by the use of magically infused parkour, which allows for some really good dodging and manoeuvring around enemies for a battle angle of attack. These look absolutely beautiful. The Tantas in particular are an absolute highlight of the combat system, offering some epic battles, but sadly they can sometimes be a little too easy even on the normal difficulty, and this goes for most of the gameplay. It seemed to feel too easy in its normality mode. While the combat shines, the rest of the world does feel somewhat empty. The game world is large and has things to do, but the locked labyrinths or dungeons all look the same and lack a lot of variety. The bosses within these are also a bit of a disappointment, with similar attack patterns and a lack of a real challenge, again coming back to that difficulty. There are also fonts and places of interest that can provide new gear and spells for Frey to use, hunting some mutated beasts, but these activities do feel rushed and they just lack substance. Overall, the game could benefit from longer, more detailed and varied dungeons, more unique boss fights, just more challenging battles in general. Parkour being infused with magic was a great concept. Running faster, gliding over water, grappling objects and even floating really complement both the traversal of the land, but also in combat to avoid attacks and get those better angles of position. Whilst on the whole the parkour was actually fun to use, I would encounter issues especially in more cluttered areas such as cities or towns, where Frey would suddenly parkour up thin air, leap over nothing, or just get stuck on the terrain like a body on the floor or a single loose brick that was lying around. But one of the pet peeves is invisible barriers. There are areas the game doesn't want you to go, but instead of making them inaccessible through other means, the developers have just thrown up invisible walls so you can't get past. For me, this feels incredibly lazy, again, especially from AAA developers. Side missions provide a better insight into the characters and world introduced in the story itself, and the most part, these were actually really well done. I like that these missions let you explore further either the history of Athia or learn more about the characters that you've already met through the main story. But the biggest praise I have to give is that they don't actually impede the main story progress. They're not thrown as barriers to the main story or to slow the overall progression down like we see in a lot of other open world games. I'm looking at you, Assassin's Creed. If you want to ignore these, you just can. Some do feel better written than some of the others do, some felt way too long, while others actually felt a bit too short. But overall, much better than what we have in a lot of those other games. Despite its issues, I actually did enjoy playing Forspoken, for both its combat and its story. I really did get immersed into Frey's journey, the story she had to tell, and her experiences. But the game definitely has its problems, which I'm sure will be fixed over time, but honestly, from a AAA company, this isn't good enough anymore. The game isn't finished on PC. I'd have much rather waited for something polished. Overall, the game is very mid-tier because of all this. It's about a 6 out of 10 if I had to give it a score. At its current price point and with the issues it has, graphical performance and lack of real substance to the world at large, I would advise players to wait before buying this game when the prices come down by quite a bit, to be honest, and the performance issues have all been improved. But I want to hear from you. Have you played Forspoken? And if you have, what did you think of it? Did you enjoy the game? Did you have any issues that I haven't mentioned, or did you not have any issues? I'd love to hear from you. Again, this was my review from a PC version perspective. I know the performance issues aren't as apparent on the PlayStation version. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below. If you want to see more from me, you can find another video here. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.